Okay, we're going to be talking about war crimes are everywhere. This is our first meeting here. This place is actually going out of business, so I don't know how many meetings we're going to have here, but we're going to try and have. We have a meeting in East Dallas at the Denny's on Highway 75 and Royal Lane exit. We do that on I think it's the second and the first and the third Tuesday. I'm not sure, but anyways, twice a month we have a meeting in East Dallas. So we're going to try and have a meeting on the alternating weeks here for anybody that's interested. And there's a lot of things to talk about, and so I just this is actually one of my YouTube videos that I did, and we'll talk about this. And if you have questions, you're welcome to once we get through it. Then there'll be an opportunity to ask any questions you might have. Anyways, this one's called War Crimes Are Everywhere. And a lot of people don't realize that that's what they're doing, what's going on. In the causes and necessities for taking up arms, and I don't even think I have that in here, quite frankly. What I have is a couple of sites, one from Webster's dictionary. Under International Law of Warfare, all parties to a cause must appear by nom de guerre, okay, which is a fictitious war name. That's why they spell your name in all block capital letters in all court cases. And because the alien enemy cannot maintain an action in his own name. And that's Merriam-Webster's dictionary, page 1534. So, and then this is from Black's Law Dictionary, 5th edition, page 1420. And it says a mixed war is one which is made on one side by public authority, the other side by mere private persons. So that's what's happening. Any court case is warfare. And you have to understand that. The Founding Fathers, and I don't even have that in here, but if you look at the causes and necessities for taking up arms, 1775, that was the year before the Declaration of Independence, they said that because the king has expanded the courts of admiralty far beyond their ancient limits and superseded common law, and so what they're saying, and that's what everything that I've read tells me that that's exactly what happens, is when you have martial law, common law goes away. And that's exactly why they want martial law, because at common law they'd be put to death for doing what they're doing. Okay? So anyways, in the cause and necessities for taking up arms, it said that because the king had expanded the courts of admiralty far beyond their ancient limits and superseded common law and replaced it with law martial. And then the last phrase that I have cited out of there, we saw the despotism that was coming, and so we revolted. That's why we took up arms. And I guess we'll see what happens here in this situation. But the Founding Fathers figured this out, long before we did. I think a lot of it is that they're deliberately dumbing people down with fluoride in the water and doing things so that people don't have a clue about what's going on. And they have a pretty tight rein. The news media is bought and paid for. We all see that. I think we've got a good guy in the White House, but he's only one guy. And I'm sure I believe he's doing, as much as he can, probably more than many people would or could. And he's got, I've heard stories about him. Like, for example, one thing I heard is that he's got his own private security. He doesn't trust the Secret Service. And another thing he does is they'll be driving down the road in his motorcade, and he'll say, "Stop at McDonald's." And he'll go in there and get a burger, because they're already made, and there's no time for anybody to slip anything into it. You see what I'm saying? And not that a McDonald's burger is that good anyways, but but so he's brilliant. I read his book back in the 90s, The Art of the Deal, and he's 3 steps ahead of him. And you can see him even on the news media. He reels them in. Okay, he throws that stuff out there. He looks like some sort of wacko, but he's baiting them. In my opinion, is exactly what he's doing. He's baiting them. He's reeling them in, and they take it every time. Eh? Anyways, so the next slide. Go to the next slide. Governments descend to the level of mere private corporation and take on the characteristics of a private citizen, where private, corporate, commercial paper, which is Federal Reserve notes, and securities is concerned. For purposes of suit, such corporations and individuals are recognized as entities entirely separate from government. That's the Clearfield Doctrine, Clearfield Trust Company. And so the point being is that that's one of the reasons they had to get this this military script, okay, which is Federal Reserve notes. That's military script is what it is. And that's another symptom that we're under martial law and have been for decades. And so that's one of the reasons that they had to bring that about, because nothing's ever paid for it. And at common law, only gold or silver coin are legal tender. And so if you don't have legal tender, then you just walked away, or you just gave up common law by doing that. And these courts, or these so-called courts nowadays, won't even accept gold or silver coin. If you give them some, they'll convert it into Federal Reserve notes at the going rate. See what I'm saying? And you know, they're, you know, don't get me going. But so the international law rule, okay? This is taken from a book called the Jurisdiction over Federal Areas Within the States, a report of the Interdepartmental Committee of the Study of Jurisdiction over Federal Areas Within the States, Part 2. There's 2 parts of this book. It's huge. Like this part here is probably about 600 pages. The other part's like about 1,200 pages. Anyways, it was submitted to the President in June 1957, and it basically says that all state statutes are actually federal statutes under martial law. And now even common law, okay? And this is another symptom of martial law, is they want to maintain the illusion of common law, and so you'll have, there's no law. Under martial law, there is no law. And so they have to, if people figured out what was going on, there'd be a revolt overnight. And so what they have to do is they pass statutes, and I'm sure you've all seen them, that says that common law should be the rule of decision. And then they put all these wheretofores and heretofores and stuff like that, so you don't know when it's going to be used and when it's not going to be used. And then on top of that, like in Arizona, I saw a statute that said that all Arizona laws are subject to federal laws, and which means that's martial law again, because Arizona isn't really an independent state; it's really a territory under that statute. You see what I'm saying? Because they're doing what the feds tell them. And in fact, in that book, Non-Ratification of the 14th Amendment, that Judge Ellett talks about that under martial law, that anything the state does isn't an exercise of state sovereignty. It's really complying with the edicts of the military power. And so, you know, that's the kind of stuff that's going on, and most people don't have a clue that that's what's happening. But anyway, so this is the international law rule, and then there's, under international law, they can assault you and kidnap you and falsely imprison you, and if you sign anything, you make it legal by doing so. Okay? That's why they always want you to sign something. Okay? They always want you to sign something, because you just made it legal. And it was like, you know, when the U.S. went into Serbia, right? I mean, they were, and they do it all the time. Okay, they just walk into some country, and then when there's a treaty signed, well, you just made it legal by this treaty. You see what I'm saying? And so they do that stuff all the time. And this is the Geneva Convention relative to the protection of civilians in the time of war of 1949. And this is where, you know, as much as I despise the UN, quite frankly, if that's the only remedy available, then that's the one we have to go for. And there are remedies that are available there. But it's all these courts, all these judges are United Nations. Okay, that's what the bar is. Okay, the bar is from London, and so this is all coming from the UN and the Roman cult is where it's really coming from. But this is Article 2 of the Geneva Convention relative to the protection of civilians in time of war. It says, in addition to the protections which shall be implemented in peacetime, the present convention shall apply to all cases of declared war or of any other armed conflict. Well, think about that. That's pretty wide open. I mean, that when a cop stops you on the street, he's armed, and so and it's already said that anytime they anything between private individuals and public authorities is warfare, right? And so when a cop stops you on the side of the street, that's an armed conflict. And then it even goes on. It says even if the state of war is not recognized by one of them. Okay? So even if you don't know that it's a state of war, it's still an armed conflict. And in the Geneva Convention, it actually says that the rights that are in there cannot be signed away. You cannot give them up. And so I've actually heard of people who have been in jail and did something similar to a habeas corpus and brought up that I'm a protected person under the Geneva Convention relative to the protection of civilians in the time of war of 1949, and you're engaged in war crimes, and they kick them out of there so fast. You know, I've heard about that. I don't know of anybody, but I've heard about it. And so it would make actually a lot of sense, because they know that they're involved in war crimes. And that's the reason, quite frankly, like in Canada, they have actually a War Crimes Act in Canada, and it brings in the International Criminal Court and talks about the Rome Statute. Now, again, I have no great love for the UN or any of this stuff, but again, if that's where your remedy is, then that's where it is, you know. And so, anyways, in Canada, they got this War Crimes Act that talks about the Rome Statute, and so what I did was, I think you all know, or some of you know, that I had a run-in with the Canada Border Pigs. I sent a really, really scathing letter to who's who in Canada, okay, to the Governor General, to the Prime Minister, to the Queen, registered mail, every one of them. There's hundreds of them I sent out, and it starts off, normally I'd say I'd accept your oath of office, but we already know you're going to ignore your oath of office, so then I start going into four-letter words and all sorts of stuff like that. You know what I mean? Calling them names, okay? And then I say PIG is an acronym, and it stands for persons in government that intend to perjure their oath, and you're a pig. And I say, and if you or any of your pigs have an issue with me, just name a time and place, and I'll come armed, and we'll settle it for once and for all. And then it goes, but I already know your pigs are cowards because they operate in packs and they try and disarm everybody. That's what in Canada they do. People can't have guns and that kind of stuff, and so they want to make sure they can't defend themselves. And I just tear a strip off them. It's like about 11 pages long, and I just tear a strip off them. Anyways, so what happened though, the interesting thing that happened, and I tell them, you guys are involved in war crimes. You're persecuting me for my political beliefs, which is a war crime. You're engaging in reprisals. You pillaged my property. You've done all of these things. You see what I'm saying? And I just tear a strip off them. And so what happened is the Attorney General for Canada got mine, and the Rook was really one of the big ones in Canada that was doing this stuff. He did this pseudo-commercial order, argument order, okay, which basically talked about, and put my name in it too. Anyways, and so he's an associate chief judge in Alberta, and what happened is and I named him in this thing, and so the way it works in Alberta is they have an associate chief judge of the Court of Queen's Bench and a chief judge. And when the chief judge retires, the associate chief judge moves into his position. See what I'm saying? So it's kind of like, they get promoted, or it's an automatic sort of thing. So what happened was, I served this registered letter on the Attorney General for Canada. The chief judge's position was vacant. The chief judge in Alberta had retired. Rook was next in line. I served this thing on the Attorney General for Canada. 2 weeks later, they appoint a new chief judge, and it's not Rook. Okay, they bypassed him. And I think that speaks volumes. I'm telling you, it's powerful. And it's exactly what's going on. And they won't adopt that here because they obviously intend to engage in war crimes. And they do. Okay? What do you think Guantanamo Bay is all about? You know? So now, fortunately, the guy in the White House is using his military powers, in my opinion, for the way he should. In other words, he's going after the deep state, or what I believe to be. So that's the case where it probably should be used. But the next guy, if he's like Obama, it'll be back to the same old business as usual. You know it as well as I do. And so, anyways, so this is Article 2 of the Geneva Convention. And so, when that Leo stops you with his emergency lights on, and that's a good question to ask him too, by the way. So, where's the emergency? Okay, because there's no breach of the peace, and you have no lawful court order. So, where is the emergency? Or are you interested in getting revenue, and you're using your emergency lights to get revenue? Because that's exactly what they're doing. You see what I'm saying? And so, anyways, it's an armed conflict, and a mixed war is one which is made on one side by public authority and on the other side by private persons. Black's Law Dictionary, 5th edition. And so, anyways, so, and this is Article 1 of the Libra Code. A place, district, or country occupied by an enemy stands in consequence of the occupation under the martial law of the invading or occupying army. Whether any proclamation declaring martial law or any public warning to the inhabitants has been issued or not, the physical presence of the army declares its martial law. So think about that. I mean, Texas, there's a civil war. Well, I mean, you could go back to the Royal Proclamation of 1763, because in there it says that the original 13 colonies is the only place that anybody should be, and they have to get a passport to go into Indian territory, and anybody that's in Indian territory has to leave. They ordered everybody to leave. And so then it's an armed conflict again. You see what I'm saying?
Who ordered them to leave? The Indians?
No, the Crown at the time ordered anybody that was a colonist to leave the Indian territory. So anyways, but then there's also the Civil War. Okay, we all know the Civil War went on, and Texas is under a military occupation and has been ever since then, and all of the southern states, but more so if you look at like the Treaty of Hidalgo. Okay, that was the war with Mexico, and with the war with Mexico, because all of that, I mean, California, Oregon, all the western U.S. was originally, even the Louisiana Purchase was originally part of Mexico. And so then that could be argued that we're under a military occupation. Okay, I mean, there's a whole bunch of reasons why you could make those kinds of arguments. And the Libra Code says it. Okay, just the physical presence of the army declares its martial law, and that is it. That's all it takes. And like in Canada, everything west of what was then the 13 colonies, or what was small parts of Quebec, was Indian territory. And so again, and the occupying force in Canada was the Royal Canadian Mounted Police. Okay, so that's all it takes. You see what I'm saying? Anyways, this is Article 2 of the Libra Code. Martial law does not cease during a hostile occupation except by proclamation ordered by the Commander-in-Chief or by special mention in the Treaty of Peace concluding the war, when the occupation of the territory continues beyond the conclusion of peace as one of the conditions of the same. So the only way that martial law can end is they have to has to be specifically mentioned in the Treaty of Peace, while the Treaty of Hidalgo says nothing about ending martial law. The Civil War, there was no proclamations ending martial law anywhere. And I've never seen yet anything in any Treaty of Peace ending martial law. And so martial law continues to this day. So then the question is, that's talking about some of my other videos. Anyway, so then the question is how does the Geneva Convention come in? And the Geneva Convention applies to any armed conflict and that kind of thing, you see? And so, anyways, this is the causes and necessities for taking up arms. This is what I was talking about. Statutes have been passed extending the courts of admiralty and vice admiralty far beyond their ancient limits for depriving us of the accustomed and inestimable privilege of trial by jury in cases affecting both life and property, to supersede the course of common law, and instead thereof to publish and order the use and exercise of the law martial. And that's right in the causes and necessities. The Founding Fathers understood this stuff, and they revolted. And it goes on, and for altering fundamentally the form of government we saw established by charter, we saw the misery to which such despotism would reduce us. And so that was the causes and necessities. It's the same thing that's going on now. It's exactly the same thing, yes.
Can I ask a question?
What's that?
I'm sorry for being late. The traffic was terrible, and I've never been here, but so you may have already answered this, but I assume most people in this room realize that the geoengineering is going on.
Well, yeah, that's all part of it, because they want to kill off a bunch of people.
And has since 1948. So
no doubt.
That's a form of genocide.
Well, it is, absolutely.
So they never asked permission to do things
so
like
you could
this.
bring that up.
Pardon me?
You could bring up war crimes.
Yeah, okay. So what makes any of us think they're going to ask our permission to implement any of this?
Well,
they're not. They're just going to do it, aren't they?
Well, you know, let's face it, if you don't complain, they're just going to walk all over you. And that's the problem, is nobody's complaining. That's the reason I do my videos, because all of a sudden people start bringing it up. And if you do it the right way, at the right time, because again, that's all the UN, and they really don't care about justice or anything like that. Matter of fact, they would rather support the genocide agenda to, you know, kill off some of these useless eaters. And so unless you have your ducks in a row and bring it up at the right time and everything, then nothing's going to happen. But that's why I did that registered letter to Who's Who in Canada, and that's why, you know, I may never get a remedy out of it, but I guarantee you things are going to change. Matter of fact, a friend of mine told me that all the judges in Canada are under investigation now. They didn't know what it was all about or anything, but I'll bet you it's because of that letter I sent out. And so I've also heard that the U.S. border pigs are under investigation too. And
by who?
Huh?
By who?
The Department of Justice.
I thought they were all crooked.
Have you ever talked
Well,
with
they might be. You know, I don't know. You know, I don't think all of them are, quite frankly.
Well,
There's-
Many of them at power are.
well,
Exactly.
some of them are crooks. There's no doubt about it. But I believe that there's a lot of good and honorable people in there too.
Really?
Sure there are, but they have no power.
What percent?
Well, it's hard to say. What's that?
What percent of them you think are okay?
I have no idea. And
The only reason
you know,
I ask-
all I can say is that, you know, a good example is I sent a registered letter to the Pennsylvania Attorney General. It's one of my standard notice and demands saying I accept your oath of office and a bunch of things. This is, you know, 8 pages. And so, and this was back in 2009, 2010, something like that. And I told him I'm going to be traveling in Pennsylvania and I don't have a driver's license. And one of his flunkies sent me back a letter saying, if you drive in Pennsylvania without a driver's license, we're going to arrest your butt and take you down and put you in jail. And so I went and attached that letter with my notice and demand that I'd served on by registered mail, and I sent it to the U.S. Attorney in Harrisburg, Pennsylvania. And 2 weeks later, I get a letter back from them saying we've referred this matter to the FBI. And then 6 months later, I'm looking on the Pennsylvania Attorney General's website, and they have an acting Attorney General there. So what my point is that if you have a defeatist attitude and say nothing's going to change, then you might as well just get used to your slavery. If you want to make a change, then you got to do everything you can to put a stop to it and assume that there's good and honorable people there that'll take care of business for you. You know, really. There are, and that's one of my concerns, quite frankly, about Sessions. It doesn't seem like he's very vigorously pursuing some of this stuff. But you know, we don't know what's going on behind the scenes, in all fairness to him. And so, you know, let's give him a chance. And that's my attitude, is that's why I serve him with my notice and demand. Quite frankly, you know, I've got letters from chief judges, or judges, where I send them a notice and demand, and they send me back a copy of their oath of office and surety bond. That's like, for a judge, that's like saying, I stand naked before you. You see what I'm saying? And so that judge was a good and honorable guy. I mean, I would never hurt a judge like that, and I know he would never do anything to me. But because he's telling me how I can hurt him. And so the point being is that there are good and honorable people, and there's a lot of crooks, there's no doubt about it. We've been asleep at the wheel for, and what did Franklin say? The price of liberty is eternal vigilance. Well, eternal doesn't mean go to sleep in 5 minutes.
Well, those guys are all wealthy. The rest of, maybe some of us have to work for a living.
I agree. Well, normally I'd work for a living, but I've been out of work for 5 years, so I understand that too. And the whole system is really satanic, because they compel the disclosure of a social security number, all of this stuff. And that's one of the reasons that, because I don't have a social security number and I'm not prepared to give them one. And so I do contract work, and I haven't been able to get any contract work. And again,
you can't fill out the job application.
Huh?
It's difficult to fill the job application out without any.
I agree. I agree. And I mean, that's why I say it's all satanic. But the brain dead idiots out here are so brain dead and stupid that they don't know what's going on, and they dumb down the fluoride in the water and the chemtrails and all the rest of it to make them sick.
The what in the water?
Huh?
Fluoride.
Oh,
Fluoride.
Fluoride drops your IQ points by a minimum of 15 points.
But the point is
What does TV do for you?
That's the programming.
That's the MK Ultra, man.
I mean, I'm staying with a friend of mine right now because I've been out of work for 5 years, and he's nice enough to let me stay at his place. And his mother is in her 90s, and she is like off the deep end. I want to die, and she's hurting. There's no doubt in my mind that she's hurting. And if she was in an old folks' home, she would have been dead a long time ago. He insists on keeping her at home so he can watch her, because she would have been dead a long time ago in an old folks' home. And so, but he gets no appreciation from her at all for that, and she just does nothing. I hate you. I want to kill you. I mean, that's the kind of stuff she says. She's like just completely off her rocker. Oh, but again, she's been in the system all her life. She doesn't know, all of this stuff. She's, I mean, we have been either A, we got abused to the point that we stood up and said, hey, what the heck is going on here? Or B, we've been on top of it all along. Yes.
LBJ, if he said this may be the only honorable or realistic comment he ever made, but he said, if you keep your foot on a black's neck long enough and you slip off, your foot slips, he's going to get up and take a swing at you at the very least.
Well, I would.
Yeah.
But I mean, my attitude is that racism that's all planned from the beginning, okay? And there's a papal bull called Dum Diversus back in like 1452, where the Pope Nicholas, I think his name was, went and told the European kings that they could go ahead and conquer and enslave anybody who wasn't Catholic. And so they came to America, and they went to Africa, and they captured all these people in Africa, and they went to South America and even America, and they basically enslaved the Indians and killed them wholesale and did all that stuff. Yes, no doubt about it. Oh, this is taken from the non-ratification of the 14th Amendment. I was telling you about that.
Yeah.
Where
everybody got to be a slave.
Yeah.
That's what happened.
But so let's get back onto the point here, and we're talking about war crimes. So this is actually, if you go back to the causes and necessities for taking up arms, well, this is basically this non-ratification of the 14th Amendment. They're saying basically the same thing. And this is this Judge H. Ellett of the Utah Supreme Court. He says, in the meantime, civil law was a form of law imposed in the Roman Empire, which was largely, if not wholly, governed by martial law rule. Equity has always been understood to follow the law. To have superior equity is to turn things on their head. This is exactly what happens when martial law is imposed. If equity is the law, then it follows its own course rather than following the common law, thereby destroying common law and leaving what's called equity in its place. And so all of these courts, and even if you look in Title 28 United States Code, it says the federal courts are courts of admiralty and equity. And an admiralty court, and that's why I've been to the Supreme Court 5 times. And in my, not this last petition, but the one before it, one of the questions, you know, you're supposed to, as part of a certiorari, you're supposed to ask a bunch of questions. So one of the questions was, under what authority does the U.S. Court of Appeals for the Fifth Circuit say they have Article 3 judges when they don't have authority to convene a common law jury? And there's actually a court case that says that one of the requirements for an Article 3 court is that it's got to be able to convene a common law jury. And it's interesting to note that if you go to the U.S. Court of Appeals for the Fifth Circuit right now, to the website, it won't say anything about being an Article 3 court or having Article 3 judges. And so they're not. There's no Article 3 courts. Yes?
I was just going to ask you a question. In your research, have you ever found an Article 3 court?
Not from the government. Okay? And that's, I just filed a criminal complaint and sent it to Sessions. And one of the things I said, the House Committee on the Judiciary, the chairman, and the Senate Committee on the Judiciary got a copy. And I told them that Congress is in breach of trust because they failed to provide Article 3 courts. Because none of them are Article 3, state or federal, it doesn't matter. It's all bar members, okay? That's the biggest reason right there, because they're not competent to be U.S. citizens. They're not U.S. citizens.
Well,
they're all foreign agents of their own cult. Yes?
List the so-called governments as private private corporations, for-profit corporations.
By the way, while I'm thinking about this, Anna Von Reitz is going to be coming to the Republic of Texas meeting in March at Nolanville. I'll be sending out an announcement. So, but
Where?
It's Nolanville. It's just outside of
Temple.
huh?
Temple.
Yeah. It's near Temple. It's by Killeen. But anyways,
Which month?
sorry.
Which month?
March. Next month. The next one. Right. So there's probably going to be a lot of people that are going to. She's a pretty interesting lady. She talks about the same kind of stuff. But
Can you spend 5 minutes and give us a bibliography of her?
She got 800 documents out.
she's
good.
I mean, I know who she is, but I don't know where she came from. Or
she is a justice of the peace from Alaska, and she's retired. But she's basically come out of retirement to do this stuff, and she has a home in Lampasas, Texas.
What's her name?
Anna Von Reitz.
She's had her belly full of it.
And she's had enough, but she's coming back, and I don't know if she's going to participate in the Republic of Texas or not, but certainly, you know, we need as many people as possible to participate. And so, you know, again, you know, nothing's perfect. And so we have our problems too, but it's, in my opinion, the only game in town for Texas. And so at any rate, yeah, she's going to be at the Congress.
Mexico coming back and lay claim.
Sorry?
Then, if it ever happened, which it won't, of course, then Mexico would come back and lay claim.
Well, they can't because they actually gave us up, right?
In the for what it's worth part.
Huh?
Why don't you just sue for peace?
In the truth, it's possible,
Sue everyone.
and we have the
I
technology.
mean, the Civil War was a Civil War.
It was an uncivil war.
It
It
was
was
a
war.
commercial mercenary.
Actually, you know, my theory on the Civil War, did you know, first of all, the 1840 war with Mexico was started by a false flag operation in the Caribbean?
What are the
I don't know if you knew, but... so, I think, see, the Civil War was supposed to have been started by when the South fired on Fort Sumter, which was a U.S. military base in South Carolina. And the Civil War was supposed to have been stopped when the South fired on Fort Sumter. Well, I think that was a false flag operation. They had already done one for the Spanish-American War. So I think that the Fort Sumter incident was a false flag operation. And I think the Southern gentlemen that seemed to, they were really egotistical. And, you know, they had all these slaves and landowners. And the whole Civil War was orchestrated. And it was the false flag operations, and the powers that be wanted it to make it happen. And so they went and got it going. You see what I'm saying?
Sure.
CIA is, in my opinion, it's the Roman cult. And the best thing that we could do is Kennedy wanted to get rid of the CIA, and I think he's 100% on the money. And I think Trump is working towards that objective, but he's smarter, and he's letting them hang themselves, and he's kind of reeling them in, and you know, that kind of thing. But you know, at the end of the day,
he was
who
trying
knows?
to change the money out too. He was wanting to go back to low interest,
Lawful.
printed by the Treasury.
Yeah, Kennedy had a lot of enemies. But anyway, so back to the topic at hand. This is, there's no common law offenses, only those acts which Congress has forbidden with penalties for disobedience of its command. See you later. Are you leaving?
Yeah.
All right, thanks for coming.
Yeah, thank you. Good to see you, Glenn.
You bet, take
I'll
care.
be back on the next meeting.
Okay. Anyways, so there's no common law crimes. Okay, again, this is all about martial law. So there's no common law crimes. This is offenses against the United States, but the same thing applies in Texas, under Texas law. No act or omission is a crime unless made so by statute. Again, that's one of the symptoms of martial law. Okay, we're all under martial law, and that's why when there's a court case, it's the state of Texas. It's not the people of Texas. It's the state of Texas. That's a corporation.
It used to be against the peace and dignity of the
Exactly.
but
Exactly.
Not there anymore.
I know. And so, anyways, all common law, this is Arizona statutes, all common law offenses and affirmative defenses are abolished. This is Arizona statutes. No conduct or omission constitutes an offense of an affirmative or an affirmative defense unless it is an offense or an affirmative defense under this title. In other words, it's got to be written down, okay? Again, that's all evidence of martial law. That's Arizona. They all have this kind of stuff. And so, this is Arizona again. The common law only so far as it is consistent with and adapted to the natural and physical conditions of this state and the necessities of the people thereof, and not repugnant to or inconsistent with the Constitution of the United States or the Constitution or the laws of this state. See, again, they go and throw all these heretofores and wherefores and all this other crap in there, so you don't really know when it applies. Again, because it's martial law. And so they want to maintain the illusion. They want people to be stupid and think that. So anyways, and then Edward Thieves' Admiralty. This is Tomlin's Law Dictionary, 1835 edition, under the definition of admiralty. A writ of error doth not lie upon a sentence in admiralty, but an appeal. And that's citing Book 4 of the Institutes and the Laws of England, which is by Coke in the 1500s. So the point being is that that's why they have all these courts of appeals around. They're all admiralty courts. Okay? That's all they are.
Well, who pays the judges?
Well, again, yeah, no joke. No joke. They're all paid with Federal Reserve notes. I agree.
Yeah, they hate justice too.
Please use military rank structures. Captain, Lieutenant, Sergeant. Military script circulates as money. Federal Reserve notes, Bank of Canada notes, Bank of England notes. Military uniforms used by police. The wearing of clerical dress or religious habit on the part of layfolk is liable to the same penalty on the part of the state as the misuse of the military uniform. And that's Article 10 of the Concordat between Hitler and the Roman cult.
Now, when you say Roman cult, specifically, what does that describe?
Oh.
Well, the Vatican, but I don't like to give them the dignity of calling them the Vatican. Okay? It's the Roman cult. Because, matter of fact, there was in the 80s, 90s, it was in the 90s, there was a guy, a Catholic monk by the name of Father Malachi Martin that went on Coast to Coast AM, and he said that the Vatican had been seized control by Satan in 1955.
55. It wasn't in 325 AD?
Well, who knows? But he said it was 1955, so I think it was probably, or maybe before. But
there's a couple of books Mel Gibson's dad wrote.
But he said it was 1955, and he turned up dead shortly after that. So, you know, he obviously, in my opinion, died for his testimony. So that says, I mean, he was, to me, he was probably someone who was honorable. You know, beyond that, I don't know. But at any rate, I mean, the CIA is full of Jesuits, and I mean, we all know about Georgetown University being a Jesuit-run university, and those people wind up in government in D.C. all over the place. And
but it's not government.
Well, it's fake government.
People call it.
So-called government.
Yeah, but they're.
We live in a nation where doctors destroy health, lawyers destroy justice, universities destroy knowledge, governments destroy freedom, the press destroys information, religion destroys morals, and our banks destroy the economy. Ain't that the truth, eh? Well, fortunately, I think we have somebody in the White House that's going after these pedophiles, because they all tend to be pedophiles. Yeah. And so I'm kind of excited to see that happening, although it doesn't seem like it's happening fast enough, in my opinion. But you know, they have to build a case. You know, at any rate, again, all of their statutes, really, it's martial law statutes, so they have to fit it within their words. You see what I'm saying? People say that God, you teach the truth and God's going to protect you. Well, that's not necessarily true, okay? Because that's what happened with me and the Canada Border Pigs, and it still happens to me to this day that I can't find some compensation for labor contracts. So you know, don't get me going, because that stuff ain't happening, okay? And yeah, don't get me going.
I want to.
This is taken from that non-ratification of the 14th Amendment, and this is his commentary on the Labor Code, in particular Article 3 of the Labor Code, because he says, note, under the law martial, only the criminal jurisdiction of a military court is recognized law, but Article 3 says the civil courts can continue wholly at or in part as long as the civil jurisdiction does not violate the military orders laid down by the commander-in-chief or by one of his commanders. By this means, a military venue jurisdiction...
Still good, go ahead.
By this means, a military venue jurisdiction and authority are imposed upon the occupied populace under the disguise of the ordinary civil courts, and offenses of the occupied district
And officers
of the occupied district or region, because the so-called civil authorities in an occupied district or region only act at the pleasure of a military authority. And so it should also be noted that here that the several state legislatures, county boards of commissioners, and city councils are constantly legislating to please the edicts of the federal government, the occupying force, and that their legislation in this sense is not an exercise of state sovereignty, but instead a compliance with the edicts of the military force which occupies the several states, and consequently are edicts of martial law rule. I mean, this guy's brilliant. He goes through and says it really well, in my opinion. Anyways, this is Article 6 of the Geneva Convention. The present convention shall apply from the outset of any conflict or occupation mentioned in Article 2. In the territorial parties to the conflict, the application of the present convention shall cease on the general close of military operations. In the case of occupied territories, which we are, the application of the present convention shall cease 1 year after the general close of military operations. However, the occupying power shall be bound for the duration of the occupation to the extent that such power exercises the functions of government in such territory by the provisions of the following articles of the present convention. And there's a whole bunch of them. And so we're going to go through a bunch of these, of the actual war crimes that are going on, because they're all over the place, okay? There's lots of war crimes going on. And that's my little border. And this is a penal action, okay? A penal action is a contract, okay? Any penal code is a contract. And matter of fact, that the judge, well, we'll get into it here in a minute. A penal action is an action on a penal statute for recovery of penalty given by statute, where an action is founded entirely upon a statute, and the only object is to recover a penalty or forfeiture. Such action is a penal action. Notice Texas Penal Code. The words penal and penalty in their strict and primary sense denotes a punishment, whether corporal or pecuniary, imposed and enforced by the state for a crime or offense against its laws. The down penalty is defined as forfeiture to be forfeited for non-compliance with an agreement. Okay? It's a quasi-contract. This is all talking about quasi-contracts. Okay? That's exactly what it is. And that's why when you get in that so-called court and you nail the clerk masquerading as a judge down and you tell him, I need to know the nature of this, he'll tell you it's a quasi-criminal. So it's fake criminal, I guess. It's a contract. They're going to assault you with one of their contracts. That's exactly what they do. A penal action is one founded entirely upon statute. The only object is to recover a penalty or forfeiture imposed as a punishment for a certain specific offense, while a remedial action is one which brought to obtain compensation or indemnity. A penal action is a civil suit brought for the recovery of a statutory forfeiture when inflicted as punishment for the offense against the public. Such actions are civil actions on the one hand closely related to criminal prosecutions, and on the other to actions for private injuries in which the party agreed may by statute recover punitive damages. Okay, so again, it's civil.
Uh-oh, there's all our good friends and allies.
If you think this is for your protection, you clearly have no idea what's going on. So everything is by contract. It's impossible to prove jurisdiction exists absent a substantial nexus with the state, such as a voluntary subscription to license. All jurisdictional facts supporting claim that supposed jurisdiction exists must appear on the record of the court. And this is the Sestakay Trust. This is taken from Tomlin's Law Dictionary, 1835 edition, volume 2, under the definition of mort main. And what I do is I got these searchable law dictionaries, and I have them, I made them so they're searchable, first of all, and then I do keyword searches, and it's amazing some of the stuff you come up with. Anyways, yet still it was found difficult to set bounds to ecclesiastical ingenuity. That's the Roman cult, folks. For when they were driven out of all their former holds, they devised a new method of conveyance by which the lands were granted not to themselves directly, but the nominal fiefs to the use of the religious houses, thus distinguishing between the possession and the use, and receiving the actual profits, while the season of the land remained in the nominal fief, who was held by the courts of equity, then under the direction of the
Clergy.
Of the clergy. That's the Roman cult, folks. That's quite a scam, isn't it? So they get to run the clergy and the courts. And everything. It's really quite a scam.
Can I ask you guys a question? This is my first time here. My name is David Womack. I was under the impression that what was going to be going on was to kind of give you an understanding about how to take control back of what we're going through. Now, I've heard so many different people. Now, of course, you brought in Anna Von Ritson, and when I heard her, I've kind of seen her over the years. Email, YouTube stuff, but Winston Strout sent some stuff to her, communicating with her about accessing your status, correcting that, rid of habeas corpus stuff. And so I've seen different people, and like this guy here just left, he was talking about filing certain stuff. There's remedies on the private side and remedies on the public side. I'm hearing about the HJR 192-7310. So my thing is, what is it that a person has to, the truth that we have to come to take control of the name? Do we got to do something to get into the DPC? What's really going on?
If I may, pardon me, just one short sentence, and that is, there's a big movement to do away with the smart meters. And some of the people, I forget the name of the group, have had pretty good success getting people to resign. Heads of corporations, city council members. But next week there's another one. So you got to go through this 2-year process all over again. So you get that one to resign. Then, it just seems endless.
Program that way.
Well, of course.
We can't get anywhere.
Now,
that's my belief.
that's what I heard you say about, you hadn't had some work in 5 years. And from the stuff that I'm learning, that according to Scripture, you probably quote the exact Scripture where Jesus said, agree with your adversary, lest they'll take you to jail, something like that. I forget what Scripture that was. So you're supposed to come in. It's like when you start to agree, and I know I'm hearing people may even understand they talk about this conditional acceptance. It's like it's it's what you're putting together when you get into a court. First of all, you want to stay out of court if you can, but if you can do the proper information to take control of the name, file the right paperwork, and I'm hearing some people say, well, I shouldn't have to file nothing because I've been here. But my thing, when I see that, yeah, but if you don't want to go to an outhouse and take a shit, if you want running water, then you want to participate in the stuff they created. So I look at whoever, I mean, Theodore Roosevelt was the president, they took gold and silver, but then they gave a remedy. It's HJR 192, 7310, but most people never heard of that. So how do you get yourself in position to stay in honor with all of this stuff? So you don't.
If you want to take control of the name, you have to be a slave. Okay, you have to go into commerce to do that. It's all a fraud. If you participate in the fraud, then you can't claim fraud anymore. So the only way that you can do it is to be in truth and honor and walk away from all of that stuff and quit participating. If you take control of the name, then you're a slave.
And that other kingdom that
and
Jesus was talking about was not in commerce. It was loving your neighbor and building that community, and is the complete opposite of commercial. So that's a secular government.
All of that is a fraud. And if you participate in the fraud, you cannot claim fraud. And so,
well, it's like we've been in fraud since the day we was born.
Yeah,
so my point is, if I've been in fraud from the very beginning since I've been born, they took my name and gave it all cap. I've been going to school listening to a bunch of stuff that haven't been told, just like from my George Washington.
So there's two jurisdictions. You can be in one or the other. You cannot be in both. You can be in one or the other.
They don't even know they're in a certain jurisdiction.
But you do.
I do now.
Yeah.
So my point is, how can I help people?
If you capture the name, you have to go into that jurisdiction to do it.
But you can come out.
And you're dealing with thieves. Okay, think about it. What they did, they stole your name, they collateralized it, they sold it on Wall Street, they did all this crap. You can expect them to treat you honorably?
So let me ask you this, without doing that, because this is what I'm understanding, that you can file certain forms, like standard form 30, to rescind all the stuff that ever happened to you, and they have to give it back to you. Is that true? No?
They ain't gonna give nothing back.
Well, I'd like to make a...
Too many people think they can get something for nothing.
Yeah, I'd like to make a comment briefly, and that is that the consequence for violating the first commandment is debt bondage. We have a choice then. We can serve either of two gods. There's the God of truth and the God of lies.
I just want to know the truth. I'm with you.
And so, yeah, the fact is, man, most people, their hearts are not really bad. You know what I mean? They're just not.
Now, I said it was TVN that I was watching when they brought a guy was talking about George Washington for the president. There was more people, and two or three of them, two of them may have been black. I like to say, what? Everybody didn't come from Africa. We've always been here. So I'm hearing different stories from different people, but my thing is, how do I pay my bills right now? Yeah. How do I keep this lady from getting kicked out who got kids and all this stuff? So I'm just looking for a remedy to try to help people. Not selfish. I'm not looking for something. I just want to keep people from,
There's a lot of people, and just about everybody.
See, you're talking equity now.
Yeah.
Okay, you're talking, this is all the stuff you're talking about is equity.
And good equity.
Equity means...
Equity under martial law is satanic. Okay? Equity under martial law is satanic. Okay? Equity, if common law was here, is fine. And but the problem is, this is all martial law.
I have a question. I didn't know about equity being satanic. Because
they can do anything they want. It says right in their own rules. Under the current system, if he wants to go and capture the straw man, he's got to be a slave.
I understand the point, yeah. I'm just simply saying that if we go back to the original definition of the word...
I don't dispute that.
But isn't I'm a slave already? Like you said, the police stop you, pull you over, and you don't know exactly what to say. Don't you have to learn certain verbiage so you can not be thrown in jail or all that stuff?
It's a waste of time talking to that guy.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. So I'm saying I'm traveling.
Hire low intelligence thugs.
I said I'm traveling, but because you bring up, say, well, You register, you don't realize what you did when you got your driver's license, what that really is. You don't understand what that means. So we was never taught that. My thing is, how do you undo something that you've done you didn't know you did wrong?
It's all a fraud.
So that's what,
I mean,
again, what's the remedy to that?
Fraud vitiates the most solemn promise to pay. It's a nullity. It doesn't exist because it's a fraud.
So how do you do that when you're on the side of the freeway and somebody just pulled you over? You know, and you got your family with you. You don't want to go to jail.
Yeah, I know.
Yeah, well, if you stand up for what you believe, you're gonna go to jail.
Mm-hmm.
Well,
There ain't nobody in the Bible that didn't go to jail. The Bible is
Really?
like from start to finish. It's like in different instances of people coming up and butting heads with the government. I mean, from the beginning to the end.
Everything you're saying, because I'm sitting back looking at all this stuff, and then from what I'm seeing is, even from the beginning, we supposed to be we the people. We put them in government, and they was never supposed to be telling us what to do because we created.
But that's a lie right there.
you can
that's
make
a lie.
it.
Yeah, you lied to yourself.
You can make
You
it
didn't
so
put
they
it
don't
in
want to
So it's
talk
something
to you.
I'm hearing.
Be ye
You
not
can
deceived.
make it.
Certain men and people come together. I'm like, what is government? And they part of people. Somebody had to create it.
No.
The people didn't create itself.
You can make it so they don't want to talk to you.
He's probably a
Yeah,
good guy to
and-
listen to on that.
Part of that is like, I mean, it's.
I'm like, it's got to be a remedy because I'm not Jesus. Jesus walked around in a crooked world, and he went under, and he allowed himself to go through what he went through, so he could give us freedom back. And the closest thing I've seen to anything he's done is HR. He said, "Ain't no money, everything is prepaid." I'm like, okay, that's pretty good. That sounds pretty good. So how do we take something like that?
Yeah, but I think
I think
the
you might
people
have
that
given
are
us
passing that
forgiveness
around
Mhm.
are tied with the Jesuits, and I think it's something to get you snared into something else. Okay, because really, there's all there is the Matrix, or there's the real world. Okay.
Is the real world pretty when you look at it?
Oh yeah.
So my thing is, what remedy do you have? I mean, what remedy do you have?
If you can get enough people that aren't brain dead idiots and get them together, then we can start hanging some of these suckers, and they'll get the word real quick then. But until then,
Where do you live?
Grand Prairie.
Well, in Texas, we have counties that don't have a whole lot of people in it. So every county is not.
Yeah, I was on the other side of Turtle.
Yeah. Well, the last time that I got pulled over in Rockwall, I was in another individual's vehicle, a road machine, and it had Montana plate on it, which had expired 4 or 5 years before. And the policeman pulled me over, and after 45 minutes standing there talking with another cop showing up there, he gave me a citation. And about almost a year later, I went into court and finally had my say in front of the jury, and I told them straight up, they don't arrest murderers, that they're not stopping the invasion, they don't have any authority to.
Right.
And I don't need their permission to travel on my road.
Right.
And the jury found me guilty and fined me $20, and the judge waived the fine.
But your time that you got to
That's
stop
right.
to go
They
through
got a
that.
conviction.
That's
There you go.
I'm like, why would you have
Yeah.
Why would you even have to go?
But the policeman that was guarding the door in there, he saluted me on the way out.
Mm-hmm.
And the fact is, there's not really all bad people.
No.
At the
I
local,
believe we need
Six
them.
dairy cows on
Because
that
if
dairy
somebody's
farm.
not
one
being
of
an
them look
owner,
just like
they're
church.
doing, they doing stupid stuff, want to rob somebody. I'm thinking police are here. But then on the other side of that, I heard that if you really understand and you go and get the truth on the other side, that every ticket you get is really money.
Yeah, but you know what else is this? Number one, he knows about Robert and he knows about Robert, but Robert, you ever know about Robert Fox?
I just heard that name sounded familiar.
Well, Robert, it's a long story.
he's dead now.
He is. He just recently passed away. But he taught people about drawing up affidavits and filing affidavits. So there's ways that you can go down there to the county clerk's office and file your affidavit declaring who you are. And a lot of people have done that.
All of that stuff is corporate law. And the first thing, it's even in the Texas Civil Procedure, Rules of Civil Procedure, the first thing that we should always do is file an affidavit of corporate denial. Because they're assaulting you, it's all corporate law, everything on here is
That's
corporate
required
law.
corporate denial.
They know.
I didn't want to jack black.
Well, it's too late now.
Well, no, it's not. We got 132 minutes left on this tape. But what I want to point out is that you can declare right there in your affidavit that you're working for the Almighty, and you're not taking remuneration from the terrorists.